And now it's time for us to discuss more of these headlines and simple keywords with Adam joining us via Zoom. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning and happy hump day, Lena. It's a gloomy and wet one, isn't it?
I don't like throwing out cliches or generalizations, but you're from the UK. Shouldn't this be a homecoming?
Well, I've been in Korea now for how long? I think nearly 15 years now. So I've gotten climatized to the Korean climate. So it's been a while since I've experienced the bad weather of the UK, and it's certainly something that I don't miss from that country. But yeah, it's good that Korea rarely sees rain when compared to the UK. But when it does come, it's not a good feeling.
Adam, the drought season begs to differ. We needed the rain. We're getting the
That is
rain.
true.
And I'm
That is
hoping
true.
by the end of this week we'll have clear skies. One can only hope.
Yeah, there were wildfires as well, so the rain will certainly help in those efforts to extinguish those main flames that are happening as well. So some good news there, I guess.
All right, adjusting our tone from generalizations to hard news. Let's jump into our keyword news portion of the day. We're going to try to clarify these headlines for our listeners. And this is our first pick of the day.
Rice bill.
So President Yoon has vetoed a controversial bill that would have required the government to purchase surplus rice. This has sparked mixed reactions from rival parties as it was pushed forth by the Democratic Party, who, of course, holds majority at the National Assembly. What's the latest, Adam?
Right, so this marks Yoon's first veto of a bill, actually, since he took office in May last year. It is also the first such veto by a president in 7 years. So it's been a while since we actually saw a bill being vetoed at the top level. Now, Yoon rejected an amendment to the Grain Management Act, as it's known, requesting Parliament to reconsider the legislation. So it's going to go back to the National Assembly. Now, he said the bill is a typical populist bill that goes against the government's agricultural policy goal of increasing agricultural productivity, as well as raising farm household income. He criticized that the law requires the government to buy all of the surplus rice at the tremendous cost of taxpayers' money, regardless of the amount of rice consumed in the market. Now, the ruling People Power Party welcomes the veto, calling the move a natural outcome. The party spokesperson said the revision to the act was an unjust law that failed in both purpose and procedure and would destroy the future of the agriculture sector. Now, the main opposition Democratic Party slammed the veto as expected, calling it disregarding the public and destruction of democracy. The opposition again highlighted that the bill is aimed at normalizing rice prices. The minor opposition Justice Party also denounced the veto as well as a serious violation of the legislative branch's rights and defended the bill as providing minimum protection for farmers amid plunging domestic grain prices. That's because a lot less Korean people are consuming rice nowadays, and the opposition bloc have vowed to submit a new and upgraded bill. That's because it is going back to the National Assembly, but it needs a two-thirds majority to get passed again. And in order for that to happen, they need some votes from the ruling party. So, of course, since the ruling party is not willing to do that, the opposition bloc needs to come up with a new bill, basically, or a similar one to push through its goals and policies. So it's unlikely that even if it does go back to the National Assembly, that the amendment to the Grain Management Act will be passed. And so this creates grounds for more political bickering, unfortunately.
All right. As for the Grain Management Act, which seems to tackle an important issue, right? As you said, decreased demand for rice. So how do we tackle a more fundamental means of making sure that the farmers are not left to hang to dry, but in the meantime, deal with a more sustainable solution 10, 20 years down the road? Because who can guarantee that there will be reversal of a higher demand for rice, right? So the Grain Management Act 2.0, back to the drawing board. But as you said, in the political circles, contentious. That will likely continue.
Yeah, there were some suggestions that maybe the surplus rice could be used for other purposes, maybe more rice wine or some.
I like how that's sticking
products.
with you.
And maybe some other products that are made from rice, recycling rice to make some tangible goods. Maybe, who knows? But yeah, as things stand, it is still a matter of concern. Yeah.
All right. With that, we move on to our second keyword of the day.
display investment.
So President Yoon has visited Samsung Display's Asan campus in South Chungcheong province to attend a ceremony on a major investment plan. Can you tell us the details?
Right, so Samsung Display basically held the event to announce an investment of 4.1 trillion won in its Asan plant. It also seeks to launch various programs to support its subcontractors to raise the competitiveness of local materials, parts, and equipment companies. The plan is aimed at ramping up production capacity of OLEDs, specifically used for tablets and laptops. Now, the move is expected to create 26,000 jobs also in the region. The completion of the investment project will basically enable the company to secure the world's #1 production capacity of IT OLED panels. Now, Yoon said the investment will pave the way for what he called a new leap in the display industry. He noted that South Chungcheong was the first in the world to mass produce OLEDs. He called for bold investment to boost the competitiveness of high-tech sectors in order to achieve growth and innovation. He also promised support for the next generation display and mobility industries the region was strategically fostering. He said that Tuesday's announcement by Samsung was the first visible progress in the government's comprehensive plan overall to promote cutting-edge industries. Now, last month, the Yoon administration unveiled a long-term plan to draw 550 trillion won in investments by the year 2026 for 6 high-tech industries. 62 trillion won is earmarked for displays. Meanwhile, Samsung also announced that it will invest more than 60 trillion won in the Chungcheong, Gyeongsang, and Jeolla provinces over the next decade to support balanced regional development. And the government vowed to fully support Samsung efforts by resolving regulatory difficulties that it may face as well. So, of course, displays being one of those key industries that the current government is looking to foster and push for being a world powerhouse in. So more efforts are being made in that front.
All right, staying on the economy section, this is our third keyword of the day.
Rising debt.
So Korea's national debt hit a record high last year as the government spent more to cope with the pandemic. Can you tell us the details?
Sure. So the deficit rose to around 117 trillion won, according to a report on the 2022 national settlement. That's a rise of about 10% on year. The sovereign debt, which covers bond sales and financial borrowing by central and provincial governments, amounted to just under 1,068 trillion won last year. That's up 97 trillion won from the previous year. This all results in the debt to GDP ratio coming to 49.6% last year. That's up from 46.9% tallied in 2021. Now, the figure translates into a debt of basically almost 21 million won per person in Korea, surpassing the 21 million won level for the first time. Although the deficit surged last year, total tax revenue actually rose to just under 618 trillion won. That's up about 8% from a year earlier. However, the government basically spent more on the country's recovery from the pandemic instead of paying off that debt. So hence the record high deficit. Now, the government also approved an additional supplementary budget last May that came after President Yoon took office as well. Now, after the national settlement, the country will have as much as 2.8 trillion won in available funds that can be used for the potential creation of an extra budget without approval from the parliament. The settlement report will be submitted to the National Assembly by end May after a review by the state audit agency. And after that, we'll have to see if the government does draw up another supplementary budget or any policies for spending thereafter.
All right. And with that, we move on to our fourth keyword of the day.
Nuclear export rejected.
So the Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power's bid to build a nuclear power plant in the Czech Republic has hit a potential snag after reports suggest the firm's report of the bid to the U.S. government was actually sent back.
All right. So in order to kind of understand the story a little bit more, we need to go into a little bit of background into what all this legal dispute is about. It's a legal dispute over claims of intellectual property rights violations by the U.S. Westinghouse Electric Company against Korea. Now, last November, Westinghouse filed this lawsuit against KHNP with the US federal court to basically block exports of the Korean nuclear reactor APR 1400. Now, the US firm asserted that as the APR 1400 reactor is based on technology acquired by Westinghouse, the firm's approval is basically required for the export of the reactor. KHNP refutes that assertion, saying the technology use agreement stipulates that it can use the technology at home and abroad without paying royalties. The US government has basically been trying to mediate between the two. It's urged the KHNP to work with Westinghouse when it comes to nuclear exports and projects. Reports say that the Korean firm handed over details of its bid for the Czech plant last December. This was in line with US laws basically requiring certain exports of nuclear tech to certain countries to get the green light from Washington. Now, the Czech Republic is a country that the US does allow nuclear tech to be exported to. Korea just needs to report that it is doing so. Now, after the report is processed, then KHNP can basically pursue the bid and project despite the lawsuit with Westinghouse. But that report has reportedly been sent back to the Korean firm. It contains a requirement that that a US person basically file the report. This basically means that Washington considers that tech going to the Czech Republic is American and not Korean. Therefore, it's saying that an American needs to file the report, not a Korean firm. And also the US wants the two firms to hammer out a deal on the project. The KHNP, as you mentioned in the headlines, says it's willing and ready to talk, but it has hit a potential snag, so we'll have to see how the two firms work things out from now on.
All right, so we'll have to wait for the details of that sit down and finally move on to our last keyword of the day.
UN human rights.
So the United Nations Human Rights Council has adopted a resolution on North Korea's rights violations. So what's the latest on this report?
Right, so they've been doing this basically on an annual basis, but it is the first time that South Korea actually co-sponsored the resolution for the first time in 5 years, in fact. It's basically been stepping out of that co-sponsoring under the Moon Jae-in administration in order to kind of have better relations, with North Korea under that administration. But of course, under the Yoon administration, a much more hardline stance against North Korea. So it is a return to the co-sponsoring of that resolution, which denounced North Korea for its widespread and systemic human rights abuses, as it put it, and urged it to improve its rights record. And it also called on the North to ensure freedom of speech, both online and offline, as well as the establishment of independent media. And it also urged the North to reconsider its law on blocking cultural content from outside the country. That refers to a new law the regime passed in 2020 that bans reactionary ideology and culture, according to the new law. It basically bans people from distributing or watching media originating from South Korea, the US, and other countries. Violations are punishable for up to 10 years of hard labor and heavier punishment for those watching and distributing South Korean dramas, movies, as well as music. The latest resolution also called on Pyongyang to disclose all relevant information, including the whereabouts of foreigners detained or kidnapped in the North, to the families of the victims. This appears to reflect Seoul's demand for the North to clarify the death of a South Korean fisheries official who was fatally shot by the North's Coast Guard in 2020. North Korea has, however, flatly rejected the resolution, calling it a document carrying political conspiracy.
Thank you very much, Adam, for this morning's coverage. Have a safe day. Our listeners are concerned about your well-being, so I hope you feel better soon.
Well, I do appreciate that. I am getting slightly better, so hopefully I'll be fully recovered by tomorrow. Thank you. Stay dry.
Tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.